Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 20 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We would like to welcome to the program the voice of the San Jose Sharks, the radio voice of the San Jose Sharks for 98.5 KFOX in the Bay Area. You all know him, Dan Rusanowsky. Dan, how are you? And thank you so much for joining me here on this Monday evening, or where you are afternoon.
Well, Joey, it's a real pleasure to join you for the broadcast. And I have to tell you that it's just nice to talk to people as we've been sheltering in place and following all the guidelines. And of course, Santa Clara County was one of the first counties to actually impose some of those guidelines. So it's old hat to us, but still it is quite an adjustment. So we're looking forward to things getting closer to normal as we get to stage 2 and stage 3 of the recovery, as it were. And all in all, we're healthy, we're happy, and everything is fine.
I love to hear that. That's fantastic to hear. So for those that are just tuning in, we cannot thank you enough. We did have a little bit of technical difficulties in the beginning, and we do appreciate your understanding for those sticking around. 8 minutes past the top of the hour here on the East Coast, 7 p.m., 4 p.m. Pacific time. Dan, let's get things started. So as you said earlier, things are slowly opening up little bits. Out by you in Santa Clara County, here in on Long Island, things are slowly beginning to open up as well. But now it's time to, talk to people and, get back into the thick of things. So if everyone else is ready, Dan, you're ready. Let's get things started.
Sure, let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. So again, for those that have never tuned into the Zoom interview series, it's a byproduct of our flagship podcast, the Primetime Rundown. This Zoom interview series was actually put together just a couple of days after the sports world stopped. And Dan, I know you definitely remember this date, and will forever remember it, March 12th, because that's the day our business stopped completely. And for those that also know the Eastern Observer, it's really only on the East Coast. And for every single guest, 20 guests in, every single person, including Dan, has ties to the East Coast because he was born in Milford, Connecticut. So Dan, let's get things started. And we get to know a little bit more about you outside of the Sharks Media Guide. Because exactly. There's a lot of information there, but we want to hear it directly from you and from what we don't know. So broadcasting, you are the radio voice of the San Jose Sharks, and you've done it ever since they became an expansion team in 1991. Your broadcasting career started St. Lawrence University, Division I level, Canton, New York, just upstate from where I'm located. And you were the voice of their hockey program from 1979 to 86. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'd love to hear what that was like for you to get your broadcasting career started in college and your undergrad.
Well, it was really a fascinating and fabulous experience, all in all. I have to say, Joey, that the whole process of starting there at St. Lawrence back in 1979, hard to believe that, but until I got to the Sharks in 91, was a lengthy process. It was an enjoyable one. There were a lot of bumps in the road, but all in all, you look back on it and you think how lucky I was to get the opportunity to actually do something that I dreamed about when I was very young and growing up and listening to broadcasts and trying to, tune my radio in to try to get as many different radio stations as I could. Now everybody can do that anywhere they live because of the fact that they have the internet connection and they have the NHL app, and they're able to listen to all 31 NHL teams, soon to be 32. So I think that's sort of a way to extend the signal. But I started at St. Lawrence. I decided to go that route. And my thinking was really mathematical, Joey, in many respects, although I can't say I'm a mathematical kind of guy at heart. And that's because I looked at it. And at the time, there were 21 NHL teams. And there were a little under 300 million people in the United States. So my thinking was, my odds aren't very good to be able to do this, but I'd really regret it if I didn't try as well. Mm-hmm. So I took a slightly different route than maybe a lot of people would think of taking. I think the standard way of doing it is to do what Marv Albert did, what Marty Glickman did, what Bob Costas did. The standard method is to go to Syracuse University or the Cronkite School out at the University of Arizona and major in broadcasting and work on the craft that way. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But looking at the math that I was just talking about, I decided that I was going to take a different tack And I figured that it would be just as good to get a well-rounded education where I could communicate with people. I could learn a lot of different skills that would help me in any career should this not work, but also proceed and pursue broadcasting as an activity. And I think that method was involving go to as good a school as you can. St. Lawrence is an outstanding educational institution. Very proud to be an alumnus of that school. And in addition to that, they had a radio station and they had a hockey team. So I figured that coupled with any other opportunities I might have would be a good way, at least, to perhaps step in. You know, you think about it this way. Everybody in an incoming class, a freshman class in a broadcasting type university, everybody wants to do what we want to do. And so my thinking was perhaps if I chose a place that was a little bit smaller, that had all of those elements there and was a great school, I could make the combination of getting great education and pursuing this a reality. Well, come to find out, I decided to do what a lot of people should do. And that is, if you're going to go into the stock brokerage business on Wall Street, the first thing they tell you when you go train is they tell you to ask for the order, and ask for the business, ask for opportunities, ask for help, ask for advice, and try to make contacts with people that way and show that you're really earnest at trying to do this, because it is a very long process. So what ended up happening was I walked up to the gentleman that was broadcasting the games at the time, and I said, I want to learn how to do this. And he said, it's kind of funny. He said that, I have a couple of games later in this season that I might not be able to do because of another business commitment. And I'll tell you what, we'll set you up in the press box. You can mock call games into a tape recorder. We can listen to that. And if you're good, and if I think you could handle this, maybe perhaps you might have an opportunity to do play-by-play of a Division I hockey team that year. Well, here I am, 18 years old, thinking, wow, this is fantastic. That might not be an opportunity that I could get at another place until I was a junior or maybe even a senior, if at all. So here I was really, really happy. And I got set up in the press box. We did a couple of exhibition games. And then I think it was maybe 2 weeks later, it was the very first game of the regular season. It was St. Lawrence versus Harvard. I'll never forget it. And Harvard was in town, and I was going to call the game into the tape recorder as usual that I had been practicing the last couple of days. And by the way, I was getting a lot of encouragement from the individual that was calling the games. His name is Bob Vilas. And he really encouraged me and said, I think if you practice and if you really work at this, you will be ready to do this. So I was really fired up. Meanwhile, here we are in the first intermission of this very first regular season game. And the game is on the radio, and they're right next to near where I am. And I'm calling into a tape recorder. And it was time to go to break. Now, what a lot of people forget, that particular year, the St. Lawrence hockey games were broadcast on St. Lawrence University's national public radio station, which of course has one peculiarity about it in that there are no commercials in public radio, correct?
Right.
So
yes.
what you can do is you can say, well, this broadcast is made possible in part by a grant from, and then you list people that have supported the broadcast. But you can't do an advertisement on NPR. Right. So what the station used to do was go back to the studio for like a 3-minute news break. And basically that was the break that you had. And then you had to come back and do your whole intermission and, do the entire game. And then you'd have another news break or some other type of break like that at the end of each period. So this gentleman, Bob Vilas, walked up to me and he said, I've got an interview subject coming in for this intermission, and he's going to be here in about a minute. And he said, I need you to do the interview. And I said, well, don't you normally do the interview? He said, yeah, I normally do the interview, but I can't do it. And his color commentator, the great Wally Johnson, who just retired there as the sports information director at St. Lawrence, had obviously other duties between periods. So he was working with the print media and arranging a whole bunch of things with photographers. So he would depart and would do those things. So it's basically Bob's got to do the interview, or if something's wrong, then somebody else has to do it. And I said, why can't you do the interview? And he said, well, because we're in a 3-minute break and I have to go to the bathroom. So here he is. Here's the writer for the Hockey News. His name is Tom Burke. He writes about the ECAC. Here's a stopwatch. When it hits 30 seconds, you're on the air. Goodbye. And he was gone. That's how I got on the air. So that's how it all started.
That is crazy. All because of a little bit of a bathroom break. But not only that, but you were able to, keep moving forward in that little time span, just also because he had to use the bathroom at that point and he couldn't do whatever. That is unbelievable. And you said it too, is that you went a different route. On my side, we were a little glitchy here. So just to obviously, for those that possibly caught Dan a little, if it was a little glitchy, he took the smaller school route. And Dan, St. Lawrence University, over here, obviously in the broadcasting world, you hear the Northwesterns, you hear Syracuse, Arizona State, Fordham, obviously, where the great Vin Scully came from. And then St. Lawrence is really, it's not that little, especially out here, maybe out in Santa Clara, not a lot of people may know, but out here we do know it. But also Clarkson University is where, if I'm not mistaken, you also went to get your MBA there.
I did. And in fact, that was the process by which I learned about the business of professional hockey, because obviously I graduate, I'm a senior, I graduate, and I'm starting to look for opportunities. And my grand scheme of things was to go to the American Hockey League, and that's exactly what ended up happening. But the year that I graduated, there weren't any job openings.
Right.
So I'm thinking, what on earth am I going to do now? You have to keep working, obviously. And, back to that the way I started getting on the air, I'm still not convinced that he did it on purpose just to see how I could react to a situation. Yeah. But maybe he used the opportunity. Well, I have to go to the bathroom. I got to go to the men's room. Let him do it and see what happens. and away we went. And so I started doing a lot more games right away back then. Right. By the time I was a junior, I was doing all the play-by-play. But anyway, back to what you were talking about. I wanted to continue my education. Again, using the theory that this might not work. Maybe it's not going to happen for me. So I had an opportunity to go to Clarkson and get my MBA, which is not unusual. There's a lot of traffic between the schools. And I tell people out here in Silicon Valley that going to St. Lawrence and going to Clarkson would be the equivalent of going to, say, the University of, out here, you'd say go to Stanford undergraduate and then go to Cal graduate school. Yeah. Schools hate each other, big rivalry, but there are a lot of marriages between the two schools too. Yeah. So I always enjoyed seeing my fellow graduate students in the MBA program go to a hockey game between Clarkson and St. Lawrence, see me and notice that I was broadcasting the game, but I was on the St. Lawrence side, continuing to broadcast for the school. So that made for a lot of great conversations. And I had a great experience there too, academically, certainly. A lot of great teachers. And in fact, some of my favorite professors there actually did their work at Fordham. I really came to really respect the Jesuit education by the teachers that I had there that were products of that outstanding school. So it's kind of interesting how it all comes full circle, but that's sort of what happened for the next couple of years. And then I got an opportunity to go to the American Hockey League, and we started moving forward from there.
Yeah, that's, it's funny because when I was doing, I was doing my prep work and everything for our conversation, I remember I saw, that you had gone to get your MBA at Clarkson. And I remember I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm going crazy, but there's also a hockey team there as well. And
great tradition.
Right. Yeah. So, and actually they're called the Golden Knights. And did you ever call games for their Division I program?
No, my loyalties were strictly over in Canton at St. Lawrence. But again, it's kind of funny because both of these schools have a tremendous reputation academically. They're very different. Clarkson is more of an engineering institution, but they have a great MBA program.
Right.
And St. Lawrence is a liberal arts school.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, there's such a strong tradition and connection to the National Hockey League by both of these schools. So, I'll be on the circuit somewhere and I'll bump into Dave Taylor, who's scouting for the St. Louis Blues. And of course, he's one of the greatest players in the history of Clarkson. And we have a few laughs over that. And we share a lot of great stories. So that continues to this day. And, a lot of the people that I ended up working with at St. Lawrence, so many of the players, there's a whole passel of them that have gone to the National Hockey League, whether they're scouts or general managers or coaches. And so it's really a comforting thing. And as it turned out, I made a really good decision.
Yeah, you did. And the road that eventually led you out to the Silicon Valley, you had another stop actually in Connecticut to eventually get to, or actually, let me rephrase that. You went back home or to your birthplace, if you will. You were born in Milford, but you not too far, and you became the voice of the AHL's New Haven Nighthawks. At the time, they were the affiliate of the North Star, 1972 to 1977. They were the affiliate of the New York Islanders, 1972 to 73. And then also they were, I think during your time there, Dan, they were the affiliate of the Sharks' biggest rival, the LA Kings. Does that sound right to you? Yeah. So, and then
Yeah,
they were
that'd be
also,
correct. Bruce McNall, actually, who owned the Kings at the time, and his predecessors and people after him owned the team. So I was very, very fortunate to be able to go to work there, because one thing that happens when when you make the move to professional sports, you also realize that let's just say that you really have to make a big sacrifice in terms of earning a living, and you have to make sure you're pinching your pennies, and you have to make sure that you're doing everything you have to do, because it is a lifestyle job, right? So you do it. We do it because we love it. And so I was very fortunate that I had the ability. For instance, my sister and I lived together for the 5 years I was in New Haven. That certainly helped out a lot. We helped each other in that regard. And so it really was a great experience. I have to tell you that my 5 years in New Haven were absolutely critical. I never would be here without that. And in fact, I learned so much about the business of hockey away from just calling the games on the air. And one thing that's important to note is that even though it is especially expected that you're going to be able to pursue this dream by being good on the air and being able to call a game in a way that people understand it, but there were so many other things business wise that a team needs, whether it comes to selling advertising, selling season tickets. I actually had to sell the sponsorship that paid my base salary. So effectively, in some respects, I was on 100% commission. And so there's a
wow.
lot of stress involved in that, certainly. I always remember my first year, I weighed about 175 pounds when I took the job. And I remember getting on a scale Christmas morning and I was 148. So there was obviously a thing or two I had to learn about, cooking my own meals, living on my own, and so forth. So those are all things that everybody goes through. Everybody has great stories. And the beauty is as I go around the NHL and I talk to my colleagues, we all have very similar stories, a lot of laughs, but also a lot of times when we really had to bite our lip and get through a difficult time. And those are things that everybody has to understand if they're interested in this field, that's going to happen.
Yeah, the sacrifices, it's crazy because you speak about the sacrifices, and I know there are some people that I know that are watching and they see the sacrifices that myself and a few of my friends have also taken too. And, there's, especially in college too, at the St. John's University radio station, we've gone on multiple road trips when we could have done other things, with friends or whatever the
Right.
case may be. You want to hone your craft. You have to make sure you put the time in. Right now, this, as I said to you in the open, this byproduct of, podcast here that we're doing, or this interview series that we're doing, people actually said to me, well, what are you doing? Isn't this the time that you should be taking a mental break? And I said, well, no, because I'm going to just keep going downhill if I'm not, taking advantage of this time that I could be, speaking to you, for instance, Dan. I could be speaking to others and honing the interview craft, something along those lines. So it's the sacrifices that eventually get to, where you are now in San Jose and calling being the radio voice of a professional hockey team.
Right. And I
Absolutely.
and I and I would say too, Joey, that I don't like to use the word sacrifice. I look at it more as an investment in yourself, because
Mm,
that's a more positive way to kind of to look at it. And
that's true.
I'd say that as you build equity, whether it's in your on-air persona, whether it's in your business skills that you're developing away from the arena, you're becoming more valuable to your organization, and
Yeah.
that's something that everybody has to understand is so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's true. And especially when you were bringing up with sales too earlier, there's a lot of internships. There's a lot of entry level jobs that you have to take in order to get to where you want to go to. And I know for a fact with myself, I've had to do sales too. Do you really want to do it? No, not really. But also, Dan, you were talking about the 100% commission. That that is the that was basically paying your salary almost. There is an independent baseball league out east from me, Long Island Ducks. They have a part of the broadcasting internship that you are able to do, or you can apply for. One of the other duties as assigned is to also to wear the mascot uniform, to wear the duck. And some people say, well, do I really want to do this to get there? Well, look at you, Dan. You had to sell things to eventually get there. So
there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, what are we doing when we're on the air? We're actually selling the game of hockey. We're painting a picture. We're taking part in a creation of a work of art in many respects, but we're also dealing with the science of understanding how that gets to the public. You have to understand how to engineer your games. You have to understand all of those topics. What I used to do, I used to have to do the scoro, or the shoot the puck between periods. And for games that I was doing at home at the time, we did a lot of road games, but later in the season and in the playoffs in the AHL, we did a lot of home games as well. So what I would do is I would pre-tape a lot of intermissions, whether they were interviews or whatever. I would run down from the broadcast booth to go on the ice, do everything, and be confident enough that I could get back up there, sometimes huffing and puffing, to make sure that we were still on the air. And it always worked like a charm. But, those are things that come back time and time again when you have situations. And, if you want, I can share a whole bunch of those with you that happen. The main thing is you have to be able to expect the unexpected and deal with the unexpected in a way that is professional and is thoughtful and is calm. Because a lot of times if you panic, things don't go well. So it's a lot better to just maintain your calm. And if you've been through all of these things before, then you can deal with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. And, it's the time management, and it's also not even the time management too. It's the way you eventually, you learn, you mature as you get older. And it's the experiences that you take that I guess that the opportunities that you're given too, that eventually, you blossom into someone that is able to accomplish everything that that you brought up and other.
And it never stops. It really does not stop. You're always learning. I'm listening all the time, especially with this great device called the internet and all of the apps. I can listen to back in the old days. As I said, I grew up in Connecticut, so I could listen to all of the New York teams. I could listen to Boston. I could listen to Philly. I could listen to Chicago. I could listen to Dan Kelly do St. Louis Blues games if I tuned the radio just right. I could listen to Washington. So think about all of those teams in the NHL that I could listen and learn from top broadcasters, but I was limited to that. I couldn't listen to Joe Starkey do California Golden Seals games, for instance. Right. He's since become a really good friend of mine. And so it's just nice to talk about those days, but I didn't have that chance. But because people today do have that opportunity, because you can put together a podcast or, a video podcast as you're doing here with Zoom, I just think that that's just an incredible advantage to anybody who wants to learn a lot of things in this field. And don't be afraid, just get out there and start getting experience. You need to get your reps in.
Yep, absolutely. And as and what did the great Wayne Gretzky say? You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So it's very, like I said, you just have to just go out there and do what you have to do. So now let's move forward, Dan. You get the call from the San Jose Sharks. They're an expansion franchise in the NHL. And what was the moment like, the feeling like? I'm assuming butterflies and many more. It's,
Well, it depends on which context you mean. Do you mean when I got the call to say, we're offering you the opportunity to come out and interview, and then we offered you the job, or the actual moment, October the 4th, 1991, when I stepped into the booth and it was time to broadcast my very first game in a major market too, the Bay Area being one of the tops in the country, and help preach the gospel of hockey, so to speak, to an uninitiated group of fans that were still learning a lot about what the game was all about. I just thought I couldn't describe how incredible it was. One of the great things about the first game in Sharks history is that in the Bay Area, at least, it was not broadcast on television. So the only recording of the very first game in the history of the team is my radio broadcast on at the time KNEW 910. And I've taken that. In fact, we're doing something right now during the course of this shelter in place time and the NHL pause that I've actually set it up now so that we're rebroadcasting historic games. And I was able to pull that one out of the archives because one thing that we did at the very beginning was get an air check of all of the games. We have almost all of the games, almost every minute of every game ever played.
Wow.
So I've got a treasure trove of archives that I can put out there. And I'm doing that right now for fans that want to get their hockey fix. So that's on the Sharks website at sjsharks.com/classic broadcast. And you can go there and find a link, or go to kfox.com and that's our flagship radio station, and click on the Sharks link and you'll find an online player there. So I just gotten that all figured out, that we can stream 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I've been having a lot of fun with that and learning that. So you never stop learning. And in fact, the business morphs to a lot of new types of platforms, which is really wonderful because it's spreading this great game that we have to people that I always say I envy the first day that you see a game. So to come full circle back to finish up with your question, it was a dream of a lifetime to just have a chance to do a game in the National Hockey League. Yeah. And of course, since then, I've got so many great memories of so many fascinating things that's happened with the franchise. And, the Bay Area is my home. The Sharks fan base are all my friends. And I just think it's a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, I think we lost your video there. Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, that's just to hear that story, it actually gives me the chills because, you think about it and you just say to yourself, well, especially for you, Dan, who made the move cross country. That's actually my next question, is that making the move cross country. I'm assuming for you, because this was most likely, I'm going to throw one out there, an easy decision for you when you heard this, but I'm assuming deep down though, because it's, we're all human. You come from Connecticut and you go all the way across the country to the Bay Area. What was that feeling like when you accepted the gig and said, okay, well, now reality is going to set in where my family's out here, or your sister was here, and now you're going almost 2,500 miles west?
Almost 3,000 miles, actually. Yeah. It was like a great adventure. And, I made the commitment and I made the decision that if I was going to get an opportunity at the NHL level, I wanted to go to a place and make it my home. I didn't want to be a broadcaster who parachuted in for the regular season and left or anything like that. I wanted to make it my home. And what better place than the greatest place to live in the world in Northern California? The weather's beautiful. The people are great. There's tremendous culture. And there is a long-standing hockey tradition here, going back to the days when the Seals were here. And so with all of the people coming from places all over the world to come to Silicon Valley to work in this incredible atmosphere, there were a lot of people that maybe remembered hockey from when they were younger, or were passionate fans and they were dying to get a team. So it was almost like welcoming a new baby into the family. Everybody wanted to come look and see and experience and get a feeling as to what the new baby in the family was like. And so it was like that the first couple of years at the Cow Palace, and then again at what's now called SAP Center at San Jose. Outstanding, wonderful hockey building, a tremendous fan base in downtown San Jose. So all of those things were really amazing when it comes to thinking about how I felt about it. It was just so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that do not know what Dan's background is, that's exactly the aforementioned SAP Center at San Jose. That is fantastic. I have to make my way out to the Shark Tank one of these days because from what I hear, that is an amazing building. A couple of my friends are Sharks fans, so they're actually tuning in. So that really is great.
That's great.
That background there, yeah. So now, 25 plus years later, Dan, I can't believe it. It's almost, I think we're coming up to close to 30 years that the Sharks are that the Sharks are here. I think to 2021 would be, and I don't want to fast forward that quick because then we'd be getting older. But All joking aside, though, there have been some big milestones that you have called, not only the inaugural game, but how about this? How about calling your first set of Stanley Cup final games for your team in 2016 against Pittsburgh? Obviously not the result that we wanted, but again, talk about that feeling of game one and calling that game.
Well, it was the stuff that dreams are made of. Everybody that wants to play in the NHL dreams and fantasizes that Game 7 is being played in the Stanley Cup Finals, and you're out on your driveway with a tennis ball and a hockey stick and a net, and you're kind of doing play-by-play in your own way as you imagine what it would be like to be in the NHL and have the opportunity to do that. Well, it's no different for broadcasters. We feel the same way as we love this great game so much, and so. Just the opportunity to do it was incredible. The fact that the Stanley Cup was awarded at SAP Center at San Jose, you mentioned it's disappointing when the team, either whether you work for them or whether you root for them, when they don't win, when they get that far. That's a tough thing to go through. But by the same token, who would have believed in, say, 1980 that perhaps that the Stanley Cup would be awarded in downtown San Jose, and that the fans there would get a chance to see that ceremony? It makes you hungry to really want to have that happen for your team. And I think that experience was a really great one, not only for the fan base and for the community, but also for the players inside that locker room, many of whom are still trying to get their first Stanley Cup championship. And, I remember Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau, two players on the Sharks that had been very high draft picks, number 1 and number 2 overall, had never been to the Stanley Cup final. And I always remember that first news conference when the Sharks won the conference final against St. Louis. And I remember just the looks on their faces. And these are veteran players, real professionals, and how they took a seat in the news conference room and just how amazed and proud they looked to have the chance to do this. Just goes to show you how important the Stanley Cup is.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the hardest set of, it is the hardest playoffs to eventually get that trophy. Lord Stanley Cup, it's everyone says, any sport, that the Stanley Cup playoffs not only are the best, but also it is the hardest trophy to win. You could be playing a maximum of, I think it's like 28 games or something like that. That right. is the max. And it's wild because, that's an additional, I think that's because as we were talking about, Dan, our math is not 100%, but 82 and 28 is, I think, 110. So that, right. That was pretty good. All right, good. So one
calculus.
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh no. If I have my professors watching, no, that would be bad. But yeah, no, 110 games possible. That's a long season, and then eventually to be able to get it, or just the disappointment, Dan. And you know what? I'm actually going to ask you that. I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind, but just seeing sure. after, once you see Sidney Crosby lift that Stanley Cup in San Jose, and, as you said, it's great because the cup was awarded there, obviously not the result, or it went the opposite way, but, the looks of some of these players, Logan Couture, Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Joe Pavelski too, any of them, and even some of the young guys too, Jonas Donskoy at the time, scoring the amazing overtime Game 3 goal.
One of my favorite calls.
Yeah, and I've heard that call a few times from you. But going back to the question though, is that, just seeing the look on their faces, was there ever a look by anybody where this possibly could not ever be done again?
I've seen that before. I didn't really feel it in this particular series, but I remember a number of years ago, a series against the Edmonton Oilers, and it was round 2, and it was 2006. My mistake. Yeah, it was 2006. And I remember Scott Thornton, Joe's cousin, going through the handshake line after the Edmonton Oilers came back from a 2-0 deficit and won 4 straight. They ended up going to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final against Carolina that year. Yeah. But I just remember I had a sense that when he was going through the handshake line, you could almost sense he was thinking he didn't know if he was ever going to have another opportunity like the ones he's had with the team. And, as it turned out, he ended up going to LA for a brief bit, but that probably was the last real chance he had to win a Stanley Cup. So you feel for guys like that. There's so many great players. And, you're bringing up a topic that I think gets a little closer to home for those of you who are on Long Island, because when the Edmonton Oilers were these brash young whippersnappers coming in and making the Stanley Cup final with Gretzky and Messier and Kevin Lowe and the whole crew, they got swept by the New York Islanders. And that was the Islanders' fourth straight Stanley Cup. And I hear the story told that I'm not sure if it was Gretzky, Messier, or whoever, but a couple of the guys were walking out of the Nassau Coliseum after, losing the Stanley Cup final. And they ended up walking by the Islander dressing room. And they looked in and they expected to see, party galore, drinking champagne out of the cup, everything. And they leaned in and it looked like a bunch of guys had a bunch of ice bags over their head and they were they're getting medical treatment.
Yeah.
And they looked at each other, as the story goes, and said, you know what? We don't really know what it takes to win. We just learned a little bit about it by this experience. And then, of course, the dynasty team that they had eventually bubbled to the surface. But a lot of them credit that experience with something that motivated them, that taught them exactly what it took to win a championship. And I think that there was an element of that when the Sharks went to the final and through these experiences. And of course, you do it together as a group. We've been very fortunate in San Jose that for the most part, we've had a very strong core group of people that have been together for a long time. And that's changed just a tad the last year or so. Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau are now over 40. Patrick's now going to play for the Pittsburgh Penguins at least this year. We'll see what happens with those guys next year. Joe Pavelski is now playing for the Dallas Stars, made the decision to go there. So there are always changes, even among some great players. But the fact that we've had so many of those great players on the Sharks for so long makes that experience very personal and certainly very important to the guys to try to bring that cup to San Jose. And we talk to alumni all the time. They all feel that it's a special experience to be a San Jose Shark.
Yeah, absolutely. And just by, it's funny because I remember actually 2014-15 season. And I remember I had gone to the game and it was against the Sharks and at the Coliseum over here. And I remember just seeing, not only on the bench, but also because it was the time when Todd McClellan was still the coach. And sometimes we were tailgating and just walking across from the Uniondale Marriott across to the Coliseum, and you see
the gauntlet, we like to call it the gauntlet.
Yeah. Well, I think, who knows? Maybe next year you'll be walking that gauntlet one more time before Belmont Park. But going back though to what I was saying though is that you see a lot. I remember I saw Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, and Joe Pavelski. They all walked together, and they just, what they reminded me of. And I said this, and to this day I say it. They look like brothers, And it's just the way that you walk across. They were all the nicest guys, shaking everyone's hand, whatever. But again, not from the fan side, but from the player side, the business side. It all looked like family. And the culture that, again, obviously better than I do as a fan and a spectator, but it just seemed like the culture was there and the family, everything was just positive. There was not a single negative that we would see even on their faces or anything, even on the way into morning skate.
It's a great sport of accountability, isn't it? And of course, that brings groups of guys together, many different backgrounds, as we see on every team now in the NHL. And I think that's important. It's one of the things that sports does for all communities. It brings people together from very different backgrounds or political views or whatever. And it gives them a place to be friends, to talk, to enjoy. And I think that that's one of the great things that the game does. But hockey in particular, just you cannot be a great team unless you're taking care of each other. And that's something that the Sharks organization has always kind of fostered. They've always brought players in that have those capabilities without, some real veterans like Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau, who've been here for a long time to ensure that culture remains established. I think it might have had a slightly different path, or, the goal would have been the same, but it might not have been as together for as long. But I think that we've established the culture here. The players care for each other. They love living in San Jose, and they certainly like the organization, and the organization does absolutely everything from Hasso Plattner, who owns the team, to Doug Wilson, the general manager. And these are first-class people who take care of their people. And it's not just the players, it's, the broadcasters. Jonathan Becker, our president, has a phrase that he likes to talk about: teal together. And that really goes through the entire organization, whether you're playing on the team or whether you're on the cleanup crew after the game is over and you're doing a changeover for the concert that's coming into SAP Center tomorrow. Right. I mean, everybody's in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a full organization. Again, that is all positive, which is fantastic. But for those Sharks fans that are listening, enough about the Sharks for now. But remember, this is an interview and a conversation with Dan Rusanowsky and about him. So please do not leave if you really care about Dan. Okay, let's keep it going though, Dan. So to keep it moving though, with your time with the Sharks, now you have actually a duo, that one of which was on this program, I believe, let's say about 4 or 5 episodes ago, Brett Hedican. So you have Brett, and you also have Jamie Baker as well. But then you also have, whenever they're both with Randy on NBC Sports California, you have Scott Hannon and former Sharks center Mark Smith. So you, as a play-by-play broadcaster, how is that challenging for you, where potentially you could be working with 4 analysts in a season? How does that work with the chemistry together, and especially when it's not consistent throughout the season for you?
Well, it is definitely an adjustment that you have to make, but I'm fortunate in that all these guys are great people, good professionals, interested in learning. And, the main thing is that you have to understand, and I think it's important, that a broadcast be an organic thing. It's almost a living thing. You're not going to script out absolutely everything, certainly on radio. You have a general idea of what you're going to do, and then, you go in that direction, but you're able to, as we said earlier, make changes when the unexpected happens. But I think it's been a real pleasure to work with all of these guys. And what I like about it is I get a different perspective of the game from each of them. Brett Hedican was a defenseman who played over 1,000 games, won a Stanley Cup. Jamie Baker played 10 years, center iceman. He was a third line type of forward. Mark Smith, a fourth liner. So they all have different types of opinions. Scott Hannon, longtime NHL defenseman. So they're well spoken, but they also observe things differently on the ice. And I've always found it really fascinating to look at those differences, but I think it really enhances our broadcast. And of course, there are times, when we're fortunate to see the team advance beyond the first round, where I get all of them, and we do some triple casts on the radio side once the television schedule is over with locally, and it's all national news. But I guess you could say that I get an idea, and we certainly get an opportunity of what it's like for network announcers who may not know who they're working with on any given game, or people that are doing a lot of different sports. So I think, I've experienced that in the other sports that I've done too. And I just find it refreshing to get that change, whether it's, getting a different color analyst at the NHL level, or whether it's working the pits at an IndyCar race, which I've certainly done for the last number of years for a few races a year with my friends at IndyCar Radio, or whether I might be filling in doing a San Jose Earthquake soccer game. All of those things are really, really important to develop your skills and to work on your craft. So I find it an exhilarating thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you think, and that's kind of the way I saw it too. And I remember when I would see, or I would out here, it would be 10 o'clock at night, or 10:30 at night. And I would see Randy be working with, he'd be working with Jamie, or then one day he'd be working with Brett. And I know when Randy comes on the show too, I'm definitely gonna ask him the same exact question, because it affects both of you, and it affects obviously people differently with, with, I guess, the inconsistency of working with the same color analyst because of that chemistry. But now,
well, remember one thing too, that we're a team too,
right?
And we treat each other like teammates, and so it makes things a lot easier. And certainly we spend a lot of time together away from the microphone. We work, a lot of practices together. We talk about things, and, we relate and so forth. So I think it's nice to have people that you work with that are your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the truth, especially to have chemistry with all of them too, including on the television side. Now, Dan, you've also gotten to be a part of some national games on Westwood One for Game of the Week. And your name can be added to a list of really, really good hockey announcers, such as Kenny Albert, the late Dave Strader, may he rest in peace, Sam Rosen out here for the New York Rangers, and also formerly the old New York Islanders broadcaster, Howie Rose, as well. Now, all seriousness, in terms of calling two different teams, how difficult is that for you, especially when you've done 25 plus years for the San Jose Sharks? Do you still do that?
Do I still do what?
Do you still you still call the games on Westwood One?
Yeah, I've been able to. I've been very fortunate to work with the Westwood One folks on a variety of games over the last couple of years. Not every week or anything like that necessarily, because my schedule is pretty busy with the Sharks. But I've been privileged to actually broadcast games. In fact, kind of interesting. There was one game, a recent one that I did for them, that we were in Los Angeles, and it was LA versus Colorado. But there was another game too. I think I did LA versus Boston, and Brett Hedican in that one was my broadcast partner, because they flew us from San Jose. It was a close, quick flight. We happened to be off that day, so we were able to fit it in our schedule. But that makes it a little bit easier. But I've worked with great people like Joe Micheletti or Gary Green or a variety of other color analysts, and as we've just been speaking about, that's not as much of an adjustment, simply because of the fact that I work with a variety of different analysts, but they all do have different styles. And so I think the hardest part is the first couple that you do. You want to say the name of the team that you work for, because it's such a habit to keep on saying it, but they're not playing today. So you have to remember, sometimes you have to write down the names of the teams in front of you for the first part of the broadcast, just to make sure that you're prepared and that you're really focused. But it doesn't take too long. And I think that over the years, we've come to enjoy those opportunities.
Now, also, I would say the style of play-by-play broadcasting on a national on the national stage. You are in this stage would be unbiased to both teams. In terms of your goal call, in terms of anything along those lines as a play-by-play guy, from one aspiring one to a professional, how do you do that? How difficult is that at first, especially when you've been calling Sharks games, let's say for, I don't know, 6 straight weeks? Perfect example, 6 straight weeks, and you're calling for the first time in 6 weeks a national game, to adjust to that.
Well, I think it's important to remember who your audience is. That's the first thing. And the fact of the matter is that around the country, around the world, NHL fans are listening to us. And you have to understand that they might not be rooting for the team that you happen to work for. They also might be not rooting for either team. So they might just be interested because they're hockey fans and they want to hear something exciting. So the most important thing to remember is that this is the greatest game in the world. And if something exciting happens on the ice, you should get excited. Again, the broadcast is an organic living thing. So let it live. And we understand that when calling a Sharks game to our Sharks fan base, that the primary or the majority of the fans that are listening are fans of the team that you're working for. So you can slightly tilt that in that direction. But it's really, I think it's really important to give as much credit to the other team as possible. I think that it's important to talk to players on the other teams and let the fans hear them, because there are a lot of interesting personalities and stories that again, are more of a what you would call a network type story anyway. And in a market like the Bay Area, they really expect that professionalism from both sides. So I think that that's the way I try to do the game, and try to present that as I'm working with people. And, you mentioned that the people I work with, some have a little bit more experience than others. So as the people with less experience understand, they're learning exactly what to look for, how to be professional, make sure that you're giving both teams credit, but understanding also who your listeners are. And I think if you can remember all of that and try to put that into proper context, the game, it gets to live in the way I talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. You've also done, Dan, you've also been blessed to be a part of the the NHL's All-Star production crew. You've also been, I'm assuming you were on the call for those 1997 and 2019. Is that right? You were on the call for those games?
Well, I didn't do the play-by-play for those games, but I was part of the broadcast. So that's generally how they've done it. In '97, that was a very special thing for me because I was doing. Sam Rosen did that game, and I was doing the on ice interviews, and I was very, very privileged to interview Mario Lemieux after the game was over. And what a great opportunity that was, because of course we were wondering if this was going to be his last All-Star game and so forth. And he's had 9 lives as far as his playing career was concerned, and now as an owner. But that was a really special moment for me, and it was a big moment for San Jose too. For both opportunities, those 2 All-Star games and the Stanley Cup Final, I think were tremendous showcases for the community. And I think that everybody took that so much to heart, and it was so important and so much fun. But both All-Star games were great. I hosted the 2019 All-Star game at SAP Center, and so I did a variety of things for Westwood on that one as well.
That's fantastic. And to be able to do that on Westwood One, to eventually be, again, as we mentioned, the names earlier, where these guys have been proven on a national level, and your name could be in there in that same exact sentence as well, is really
Appreciate
an honor
that
for you. Yeah, no, seriously, that's something big for sure. Now I have to put you on the spot one more time. What is your best call to date?
Boy, that's a tough answer. I have one of my favorites was from a game in 2010 against the Red Wings when the Sharks came up ice in overtime, and Joe Thornton flipped the puck to Patrick Marleau, and he ended up getting a game-winning goal, and that put the Sharks not in a series win, but it gave them a stranglehold over the series. That's a favorite one because it's just felt really good, and it seemed that I got the words right, I got the emotion right, the editing was proper, because editing is a big part of what we do, obviously.
Oh, yes.
And I think that when I say editing, I mean deciding in these very quick instant what you're going to say and then have it come out of your mouth, not the type of editing that we do in production. But I think that was one of my favorites. It's hard to argue with the Jonas Donskoy moment, the Stanley Cup Final. That was a great one. Patrick Marleau scoring 4 goals in a game for the Sharks. That was in Colorado. That was an amazing third period. He did it all in the third period, and just so many different ones. So I remember that game in Detroit quite well. I was very happy with that one. Very happy with a lot of these games in recent years too. And part of that's the process of growing as a broadcaster and having the experience and then getting it right. But as a race driver says, it's very rare that you get a perfect lap, and as a play-by-play announcer, it's very rare that you get an absolutely perfect broadcast. And that's part of the process and part of the real joy of doing it.
Amen to that. That is again, that actually just gave me the chills because you look back and you critique yourself and you say to yourself, "Damn, I really wish that I didn't say that." But I guess next time you learn and you eventually. I mean, we're human. It's never going to be 100%. But I have to ask you this because I know I have a couple of Rangers fans watching. How about the 4-goal Tomas Hertl game against the Rangers in, I believe it was 2013?
I'm going to say
13. Yeah, I was going to say 13.
He was a 2012 draft pick, so that makes sense. But I'd say that was a great moment. Evander Kane had a 4-goal game too. We've only had a few of them. Owen Nolan had a 4-goal game. That's it in Sharks history. Nobody's ever scored 5. But when Hertl did it, it was just stunned silence, really, in many respects, or amazement that he was able to do that. And of course, he didn't play for the rest of the game because they were making sure that the guys on the Rangers didn't take a shot at him because he was only 18 years old. And I think Joe Thornton went over to the Rangers bench and might have said something, "Hey, listen, he's only a kid. He wasn't doing that to show you up and all that." And what a great man, Liz. I think he's a remarkable player. And that was just a real sign that it was going to be great. And of course, growing up in Connecticut, I took in my share of Rangers hockey, certainly on the radio. So that's always a special game for me anyway, whenever I see those uniforms on the ice, whether it's at Madison Square Garden or whether it's at SAP Center at San Jose. So yes, I certainly could include that 4-goal performance by Tomas Hertl as another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, it brings back, brings you back to your roots. 2 minutes past 8 o'clock, Dan, or 2 minutes past 5 o'clock on the West Coast. Are you okay right now in terms of time?
Hey, I'm good to go. I'm sheltering in place. I'm fine.
All right. I'm just making sure. I want to be, as respectful as possible and make sure that everything is good on your end as well. So, again, for those that are just tuning in, 2 minutes after 8 p.m., 2 minutes after 5 p.m. on the West Coast, that's Dan Rusanowsky, radio voice of the San Jose Sharks. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for joining us here on this Monday evening. And let's keep the conversation going. So, now, with you being the captain of the Sharks radio team, you do everything. You produce every game, if I'm not mistaken, or that's what I read up on. And with you doing that, Dan, and being, as I said, the basically the captain of the radio team and doing it all, how difficult is that to be able to make sure that you have not only as perfect of a call as you can, as well as ensuring that all of the other elements of the broadcast are stellar?
Well, that goes back to when I was doing games alone in the American Hockey League and having to do all of those things. So it's, I don't want to say it's rote, but it's an important routine that you're not that different than what a player does in terms of your preparation, in terms of the things that you're doing, whether it's putting together a newscast. I mean, I have to do that too. We have podcasts that we run during the course of the day, and you're doing all of that in a big amalgamation of getting ready to broadcast the game. But then when it's time, you're not doing it by yourself. Fortunately, in the NHL, I have a radio engineer that we have that sets things up technically. Right. We have the radio station studio engineer. His name's Brian Welsh. Actually, he does a really great job. He's very calm as well. And it's a real team effort. It really is. It's like being the hub of a wheel, and all these spokes are going out everywhere, and you just want to make sure the tire pressure is correct, and that you can get off to a good start. And that's another thing too. When I'm assembling all of my elements for the game, I've got a general idea of how I'm going to go in the pregame show, and our pregame show is half an hour. But I always feel that if I get off to a good start with the way things are planned in that particular part of the broadcast, the rest of the broadcast generally goes pretty well. The other thing you find out, you were talking about, no broadcast being perfect and everybody makes a mistake here or there. A lot of times you hear the mistake, but not everybody hears it. And so it's important to remember the old Broadway phrase, the show must go on, no matter what happens. It's important to just forge ahead. Don't get caught into something that didn't go perfectly, because that will mess you up for the bigger picture of putting on the show that you have to put on. I can recall a number of things. But one time, one of the early games might have been I think it was the first game we ever did at American Airlines Center in Dallas. We did the pregame show. Everything was going beautifully, no problems technically. And then the players were in a commercial break, and the players are skating out onto the ice for the start of the game after warm-ups, and they've been back in their locker room. And I noticed as we went to break, I heard a little click in my headset from the return feed at the radio station, and I lost the feed. And I said, wow, we might have just gone off the air. And I looked in front of us, and in front of us was, a whole row of print reporters, and all of their laptops blinked. So my radio engineer at the time, Jerry Ernest was his name, he picks up the regular landline to call the radio station and say, hey, we've just had a stoppage, let's talk about it. And his phone line didn't work. This is another interesting story I'll tell you. It was right around the time when people were starting, I know this is hard to believe now, but not everybody had a cell phone back then. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they were just starting to become more common. And I had one for the first time. It was one of those big old fashioned clunky ones, Yeah. And this was like a 4 or 5 game road trip, as I recall. And I said, I'm just going to leave the cell phone at home. I don't need to take it. And my wife said to me, she said, we have some things going on at the house, and I think that maybe you should take it, because we might need to talk at a certain time when you're on the bus or you're somewhere that, a phone might not be available. So why don't you take it? And so I said, all right, I'll take it. Well, here we are, can't call the station. nobody knows what's going on. I have the cell phone. I pick it up and I call the studio, and my board op says, I'm running commercials because we lost the signal. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but we can't reestablish any contact. Can you put the cell phone on the air? And he said, sure. So here I am doing the play-by-play in the first period on the phone. And then I handed off. Pete Stemkowski was my color commentator at the time. He does a lot of Ranger games now, but I would hand off to him. He would take the phone and talk. The same thing. We had a similar situation like that happen in Buffalo with Drew Amenda and I, when the radio engineer that was supposed to engineer the game for us didn't show up. So we had to do it, and we had no equipment. So we had to do it on a phone between each other. In the Dallas example, this is a classic. In the Dallas example, basically, I'll come back in a sec. There we are. In the Dallas example, basically what happened is that the reason why this brand new building had this outage, and by the way, remember that all the ticketing is done using phone lines too on the computer. So there were people standing outside the building and they couldn't get tickets to get in the game because they couldn't print tickets out. So, we all have mobile tickets now, and that's part of it, but still they couldn't do anything with their tickets. So these people that had paid a lot of money trying to get tickets or wanted to buy them couldn't get in the building. So it was a big mess. Come to find out, we found out a little bit later what happened. The brand new building, of course, had a lot of things they were working on to just test to make sure that they were in operation. And one of the things is that the building engineer decided on that day, and it was a weekend, to test the emergency battery system in case there was a power failure. Problem was, when he finished testing it and everything was working fine, he forgot to turn it back to AC power, and he locked everything up and went home. And he had the key. So it took about 20, 25 minutes, halfway through the first period before we got the phones back and we got, coverage back. But it was all because somebody forgot to flip a switch, and it had nothing to do with anything wrong with the building. It just was it was pilot error, so to speak. So these are things that happen all the time, and you just have to be prepared for them. But the moral of the story is always listen to your wife when she tells you to do something, because that means that you're going to be prepared for anything that might happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's really, it's crazy because I can relate to it. I know when I was with St. John's and we would go to St. John's basketball games at Madison Square Garden, we've had times where we wouldn't be able to connect with the phone line or through the internet or whatever it was, and you have to basically go back to your time, and you have to basically start talking on the phone. And if you can't do it that way, then talking to a tape recorder and do it as like a for
we've all
basically
done it.
you're real.
We've all done it.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you have to improvise if there's any errors, or in your case at that time, human error. That's really I'm sure that never happened again.
Nope.
All the way up to now. But moving forward, though, now I want to ask you this. Now, obviously, with bringing the cell phone and listening to your wife, obviously, and just being able to do games, like I said, regardless of these issues and whatever the case may be. I got to ask you this: a day in the life of Dan Rusanowsky on game day, because let's say, for instance, you forget something at home, things don't go right, whatever the case may be. What is it like for you on game day from start to finish?
Well, the typical game day would be a 7:30 game at SAP Center, so that's probably the easiest one to go through.
Yeah.
Back-to-back games present a different challenge, but let's just say it's a normal day, and the team hasn't played the day before, and so forth. So regardless of whether you're at home or on the road, the first thing you need to do is obviously to get into the office or get to the arena. And usually the way it works in the NHL is that the home team has a practice at, say, 10:30, and the visiting team has a practice at 11:30. So we're there to gather information. We're watching the players. We're checking out who's playing together and what the line combos are. We're talking to the other broadcasters, and we're talking to the players themselves. Even something as simple as somebody new shows up and you want to learn how to pronounce his name. You walk up to him and ask him how he pronounces his name. I always remember I asked Tom Barrasso, the former goaltender, whether he liked Barrasso or Barrasso. And because I had heard it actually both ways over the years. And of course, his famous response to me was, I really don't care. And so do whatever you want. Okay. But usually they'll tell you, but it's better to ask the player rather than to depend on a pronunciation guide, because there are often errors in those things. So you might be doing some of that. But the main thing that I'm doing on the morning is I'll do the coaches show in the morning with the coach of the team. We have a 5-minute little segment that airs pregame to talk to the coach about the game. And I'm talking to individual players and recording them and getting their insights as to what this game is all about, what the stories are. We're finding out what the storylines are. Then we go back on the road. We go back to the hotel. I used to go home for a home game, but now I actually stay at SAP Center all day. And a couple of reasons for that, but which we can get into maybe a little bit later. But let's just say that I stay there and I actually edit all of these elements, and transcribe them, make sure that I know what the topic is, who's saying it, how long the cut is, and so forth. And that way I have the framework for a show, and I get an idea of what I think makes sense to put together into segments for the pregame show. Of course, once you get started, sometimes it changes, right? But at least you have an element there that you can go right to that's very detailed and very organized. So we're doing that. Obviously, you're going through all the notes. You're making sure that you have your biographical information together. And I've got a computerized system now. I used to write it all down. But I find that, when you do write things down, basically, you don't have time to take a media guide, for instance. I mean, I have, for those of you who don't know what print is, here's an old Sharks media guide, right? I don't have time to do this during the course of the game, especially in hockey. I can't do that. So what you have to do is try to crystallize the most important things in a very small space, whether it's, for me, it's one open book or one page. So that's what I do. I've got my score sheet, my book, and I can basically broadcast the game with that and a quick flip card with the lineups. And I really don't need all that much else, and we can get through the night. But I think it's important to sort of assemble all of these elements. You want to make sure that you have all of that ready. And so then when you get to the arena for dinner in the afternoon, talk to your compatriots and so forth, you have a real plan of action for the way you think that this game is going to go, and you're prepared for anything that might occur. Let's say, somebody's got 399 career goals. You want to make sure you're there. So if he scores his 400th, you're prepared for that. And you don't miss that's a little thing, a milestone. I like to do things like that. Whether they're on the verge of getting a career best or if the team is on the verge of something special, both sides. So you're doing that for both teams, and you're basically, as I said earlier, crystallizing a lot of information into a more manageable space. And then from there, when we get to the arena, our entire broadcast team actually gets together, both radio and television. I think this has been great, something we've been doing for a couple of years, where we go over a couple of factors to look out for. And again, we review some of those things that we're about to go through and about to encounter. And it's nice to get the insights of the TV side, and they get ours too. So that way we have a good plan of attack. And, there might be something that's team related that the club wants you to do in a certain way, whether it's, information about selling tickets for something or whatever, whether it's something regarding, let's say you sign a player or make a trade. It's funny, I mentioned Dallas. That Joe Thornton was traded to the Sharks, and we had a game in Dallas, and we didn't find out until right after the game started what had really transpired. And it's kind of funny. You go into the press room for dinner, and that particular night there were two players on the Sharks, Jim Fahey and Nico Dimitrakos, who were in the press room at 5 o'clock eating dinner. So they're not playing. They would have had their pregame meal at 1 o'clock. You don't eat at 5 o'clock just before you play. Yeah. Well, just before the game starts, Ron Wilson, who was the coach at the time, calls the referee over, and they're looking at the lineup card. You know how sometimes they might fill in the wrong name on the official lineup?
Yeah.
Well, in hockey, you can get a penalty. In fact, I've seen that happen, where you fill in the wrong name, and then that player's ineligible to play. So you want to make sure you get that right if you're a coach, right? So I thought that maybe there was a mistake or something. I mean, there was no indication anything was going to happen. puck drops. I'm about to call a play-by-play. We had gotten a starting lineup that had nothing unusual on it. So between the time when they handed in the lineup and the game started, this is what occurred. The line changes right away. They drop the puck and the Sharks change lines right away. And I hear myself calling Jim Fahey passing the puck to Nico Dimitrakos. And as that's coming out of my mouth at the same time, I'm going, wait a minute, they were eating dinner at 5:30. What the hell's going on? Yeah. So then what we did was we counted the bench. And there was a player missing. It was they only had 17 skaters, not 18. And then we said, who's missing? Brad Stewart, Marco Sturm, Wayne Primo. We knew something really big had happened because we knew not all three of them had gotten food poisoning because we were on the bus with them coming to the building. So everything was fine. Yeah. So it was really a dramatic, but that's the kind of thing that, that you're talking about. And that's the kind of thing that could happen during a game. So back to your game day, here I am, we've had our meeting, then we have our dinner, then we go up to the booth and I get all my elements together and do a final check, almost like a pilot flying a plane. You're doing your final checks before you start your engines. And then you're off on your flight, and it's exhilarating, it's fun, and away we go. And that's how the game goes. In the middle of all that, which I didn't mention, I do a game day podcast called the Teal Report, one of which I send to the radio station. I have a 1-minute edition that goes to the radio station, but then I have a 3-minute edition that airs on streaming on the web. So I produce all of that. Then after the game is over, we do our post-game show. We have our interviews in the locker room and all that other sort of stuff. We have a live guest usually after the game in between periods. But after all of that is over, now here we are at the end of the game and we're off the air. But I have to produce I have to do a promo, and then I have to do 2 news features. And I have to do that with some actualities that I've gained. Sometimes they're emailed to me by somebody in the locker room, or sometimes I take the actual feed of the interview we just did post game with a player. I cut it out during the commercial break. And then when we're off the air, I have about a minute to do this minute feature for the news for the station the next day. And then, by the way, you better get your bag packed and hustle your butt downstairs because the bus isn't waiting for you. So that's the other thing. That's, at home, it's a little bit easier. But when you're driving out to the airport, sometimes you'll do that. A lot of times, in fact, in the Western Conference, we're traveling right after a game is over. And so you have to be prepared to deal with being up at all kinds of odd hours and getting your sleep deprivation a little bit, and then maybe trying to figure out how to catch a few Z's once in a while. So that's the interesting part about it. And it's exhilarating, and no day is identical. I just went through some of those things that we do. But we're basically there from, say, 9 in the morning until midnight. And then after that, I have to, do everything on the internet and all of that, put together the features. So it's a long day, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot of fun. It's just, wow, you think to yourself, well, now, you said earlier, you want to catch a couple of Z's. But now, let's say, for instance, when you're flying out from, let's say, San Jose, and you come make the East Coast swing, and you do, let's say, our hometown here, you come to, the Sharks play the Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils, all in one swoop, or you
if
go
you're lucky.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's true, because there have been a few years, I believe I've gone to a couple of Devil Sharks games, and you guys have had to come back out again, which is wild. Now, the question to you, Dan, is that, for you personally on the plane, are you sleeping? Or let me ask you this: are you trying to sleep, or are you doing work on the plane?
Well, you're working on the plane, certainly, because especially in a back-to-back situation where you have a very strong turnover. Although I have been known to fall asleep with my fingers on the keyboard, so that's kind of a funny shot. But so when you ride the buses for the number of years that I did, my first road trip was to Halifax, Nova Scotia from New Haven, and we drove 10 hours to St. John, New Brunswick, stayed overnight late at night, got up really early in the morning, drove the rest of the way, and played the game that night. So I've over the years figured out that you have to catch your sleep where you can. But that's an important thing. You need a good night's sleep. That might be more important than anything else, simply because it keeps you healthy. if you get a good night's sleep, you're less likely to wear down and get sick. And that's something you have to manage as well. We've all been through it where we've had a sore throat and we haven't felt all that well to get through a game. And that's a part of the process. And there are a lot of legendary stories about that. So yeah, on the plane, we will relax a little bit. The guys get, do the same thing.
I think we might have, hold on 1 second, Dan, if you're still speaking, you're frozen there. Hold on 1 second. If you could just repeat the last thing that you said, you got frozen there.
Am I okay now?
You are. Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
What I was starting to say was that, or concluding my comment on it was that, we sit and we'll talk about the game. Our broadcast group will sit together and, we let the players, have their own space. Coaches too, because the coaches are working really hard to get ready for the next meeting. They got a morning meeting at 10 o'clock. They got to get the video ready from the game we just played.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things going on. But after a little bit, and especially if the flight is reasonably long, or if you're coming all the way back, that's one thing. But usually, if you're going from one city to the next, it's a pretty standard routine. You'll catch a little bit of a nap sometimes, and then you'll jump up when you land, and you get on the bus, and away you go back to your next destination.
Yeah, it's wild, especially when especially in the winter. Winter is obviously a rough stretch of illness month, so you have to do the best you can to sleep. You can only have so much coffee to keep yourself awake, but also gotta take your vitamins too and make sure because I'm sure, Dan, just by especially you doing over 2,000 games, which we'll get to in just a moment, there have been days and games where illness has arose. Sure. It just is, and it happens to everybody. Am I right?
Sure. It's we're all human beings, right? And sometimes it doesn't work. And you'll see that go through a team too. One guy gets the flu, and then a bunch of guys do. So you just have to watch it. I'd say the important thing is to eat properly and to get some sleep. And those are and try to get your exercise where you can. Don't forget about that. So those are things that keep us healthy.
A lot of factors, absolutely. So as I just mentioned earlier, about 7 seconds ago, 2,000 career games and more for the man on actually our right, Dan Rusanowsky. So we'll get to the time where you missed in just a moment, but Dan, 2,000th career game back in 2018. January 16th to be exact at Arizona. Again, and you know what? And I asked your broadcast partner, Brett Hedigan, something like this because he's played 1,000+ games in the National Hockey League, and you've called over 2,000 career games in the National Hockey League. So, and I'll ask you the same exact question as I did Brett, to be in the same exact boat in terms of, more than 1,000 games, and to have 4 digits next to your name, to be able to do something fantastic and to say, well, Joe Thornton had 1,500 points. Dan Rusanowsky has 2,000 games under his belt. What does that mean to you to be able to call that many games?
Well, I'm just so proud to have had the opportunity. To me, being able to broadcast hockey at the NHL level is not just a vocation. It's an avocation, but also it's an honor and it's a privilege, and we're very lucky to have the opportunity to do that. You never take that for granted. It's a special experience, and it's something that I treasure. I think I'm proudest that I've been with this hockey team since they started. I've seen everything from the birth of the club, as it were, all the way to getting to the Stanley Cup final in 2016, and hopefully a little bit more than that in the coming years, which I know is going to happen at some point. The growth of the franchise, the development of San Jose is really a world-class city. I think those are all things that the Sharks have been proud to be part of. So to me, I just look at it as a privilege. It really is special to be able to associate with all of these great athletes, but all of the great broadcasters that I bump into during the course of the season. That particular night, Bob Heathouse doing radio and Matt McConnell doing TV for Arizona both came over and had a nice little moment for my 2000th game. They're good friends, and it was nice to have them be part of that. And so we experienced that through the league. And one of the things that really touched me so much was when the team actually did something when we got back home, because that game was on the road in Arizona, and they ended up having a whole string of messages from a variety of other broadcasts. Doc Emmerich checked in. The play-by-play announcers for the Montreal Canadiens in French sent a nice message. Joe Bowen in Montreal, in Toronto, and all of the Pat Foley in Chicago. Bob Miller in Los Angeles and Nick Nixon. I mean, these are all iconic people with their franchises, and here they were sending me video messages saying congratulations on your 2000th game in the NHL. That they gave me chills. It really did, and it was special, and it continues to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is something for sure. And as I said, and I can't emphasize it enough, 2000 plus games is really, as you said, a privilege and an honor for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at my number. I'm at 2191 regular season right now, getting close to 2000.
2191. That would be something. And and I think you would have been, that my math's right, because there would have been another 13 games at the time.
There were 12. So
12
I would have been over 2200, right?
That's really
regular season, and then haven't missed any playoff games.
Right. That's really unbelievable. So Dan, a sensitive subject, but if that's okay, I'm sure, like I said,
Sure.
you're reading the notes that I did send you. But back in 2000, a little incident had occurred, a car accident on game day, and there was, it was on game day. That was the biggest thing, and I think I'd love, if it's okay with you, if you could sort of, tell your story. And because from what I've read on everything, it was a very serious one. And not only are we extremely blessed to still have you here with us, but again, 2000 games later, what did that moment in time, what did it teach you? And just the different feeling post, missing 27 games out of your 2191, as you said, I believe, right? 2191.
Right. That's
yeah.
Right. There are a lot of directions I can go with this. I think that the first thing I'd say is that it cemented my feeling that the Bay Area was my home, because of the amazing reaction that we got from the fan base. My wife and I both, I've got at least 40 feet of signed well wishes from fans that I still have here, that the team had put out, and they had people sign them, and they sent them to me in the hospital. I think that was incredible. But so the first thing is that you realize that this is your home, and that you belong, and that the people here are really special. Everybody in the organization too. But the other thing, and I don't know how to put it any other way, but it made me less afraid of death in a strange way. Everybody wants to live, right? But I was pretty close to death on that, because my injuries were very serious. I had a fractured femur, which obviously creates a lot of concern with the femoral artery. If there's any damage, you could just bleed to death. So they were concerned about that. But I also had a ruptured diaphragm, which obviously affects what I do for a living, but it also affects whether I can live on this planet. So that was very serious, but we had the best medical professionals deal with it. The team was incredible. It was, so that part, but I do say that you have a different outlook about life. And obviously you say that you appreciate life, but you really start to appreciate it when something like that happens to you. And think about this, I'm basically unscathed. I've got a rod and a pin in my leg from the broken leg, but and I've got a couple battle scars, but other than that, I'm relatively intact. And, I didn't have any permanent brain damage, at least not so far. But I didn't, I don't have any kind of debilitating injuries or anything like that. So the most important thing is that, yes, it was awfully serious. But I also realized how blessed and how lucky I was to be able to get through that with the help of a lot of people, but mostly my wife, who was my biggest supporter and the one who nursed me through this to get back to health. So those are some of the things that you think about when, when I think about when I remember those injuries. But to me, it was the response from the community, the sense of really being in a place that I knew was my home, and what a great organization that I work for. So those are some of the things that come to mind. And again, the same thing with my 2000th game, with people around the league reaching out. The same thing happened back then. People really showing their concern, and for that, I'll always be grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're blessed to be.
Oh, and by the way,
yeah,
that's why I don't go home after the morning skates.
Right. I say, as you were saying it, I kind of had that feeling, but I was gonna wait towards the end, with that. Yeah, that's
I save gasoline and mileage too, so it works out.
There you go. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and when something like that happens to you or to anyone, it's almost like, I want to ask you this: knowing that it was game day, that pretty much slipped out of your mind, Dan, because you want to be here to do that, and in order to call a game, you had to fight to be here. Did that slip out?
Oh no, it didn't slip out of my mind. I knew that I had to accept the fact that I wasn't going to be able to work that day. But I mean, yeah. you certainly come to that realization. But what I was most concerned about was that it was going to come game time and nobody was going to know what happened. So I was, while I was still conscious, I was able to tell the folks a couple of phone numbers to call. And so fortunately that was handled, but that was tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, as we've said, really glad to, obviously continue to hear your voice on KFox, and also for me on the NHL app, that's for sure. So out here on Long Island, so that's really good. But moving on to some more positive news, or things that Dan has done. You have moved away from hockey a little bit, and when I say that, I mean you've done projects for the Oakland Athletics. Dan's Dugout being one. Dan's Diamond on the aforementioned KFox. Dan's Diamond Notes, if you will. And then, as you brought up earlier about your time with IndyCar, GoPro IndyCar or Indy Grand Prix of Sonoma, radio coverage. You were there from 2011 all the way until it ended in 2018. But then you also do race week for IndyCar, NASCAR, and Formula One. Do you do that on NBC Sports California only for the races in Sonoma, or do you do a lot of it for all of it?
That show's not on the air these days, but for a number of years we did that. It was a news magazine type of a program, which covered basically it was designed to help and to promote out the great racing events that are in Northern California, and it was primarily Sonoma Raceway. So they have NASCAR there, they had IndyCar there, and they have NHRA there. Yep. So those are three different racing series, and then a variety of other types of things that get there as well. So around that, we covered the professional racing circuit, and I was able to. We put together a couple of really nice features over the course of the few years that we did that. But this past, I guess, 2 years now, it hasn't been on the air. But still, one of the great things is that it always rated when it was on, which was great. And it's another thing that I've always really enjoyed. And so during the course of that time, I got acquainted with the great people at IndyCar Radio. So after the Sonoma race went away, it was replaced by the race at Laguna Seca. And basically, San Jose is almost the midpoint between those two racing circuits. So this past year, it's kind of interesting. You talk about doing the double in terms of doing the Indy 500 and then do the Coca-Cola 600 the same day. Well, this past year, they moved the date of the race when it went to Laguna a week later. But of course, that kind of interferes or starts to interfere with my hockey schedule, because that's
Right.
when preseason is going on and we do the preseason games as well. So I did 4 different so-called games in 4 different days. I did IndyCar practice, then I did a preseason game, then I went back for IndyCar qualifying, then I had a big suite night with radio affiliates where we were doing some of that and broadcasting that preseason game, and then the 4th day was race day. So that was a lot of driving, and boy, that was a lot of fun. So I've been fortunate to be able to do that at Laguna this last year, and whenever the race is in the Bay Area, and then also the race in Portland, which is also late in the summer, Portland, Oregon, that is. So that's been a lot of fun these last couple of years to work with some really great professionals, and that's special too.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and your work has not gone unrecognized. You've been, or you were, if you will, honored by the Bay Area Hall of Fame. Now, this was 2013. It was actually announced in July of 2013. You received something called the Sherwood Award, which is the People's Choice Award for Bay Area's most popular radio personality of the year. Now, again, we're 7 years ago, but I'm assuming, Dan, the feeling is still just as you know what the feeling is like, and you'll never forget what that feeling was like when you heard that news.
Sure, and that was in the sports category, by the way, the Don
Yes.
Sherwood Award for sports category, because they had several Sherwood Award winners in variety of categories. That both of those things are very meaningful, because they're judged upon by the people in our business primarily. The Sherwood Award, not so much, but the Hall of Fame one was awfully special. And I'm still surprised and shocked that it happened, but it did. And I'm very fortunate about that. And those are things you cherish quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And to continue with cherishing certain moments, Dan, you also became a published author. This is fantastic. If these walls could talk, and for those that do not know, yes, the San Jose Sharks also have one of those books as well. We've seen Phil Bourque with Pittsburgh. He has one as well. Jerry Remy, he contributed to that one for the Boston Red Sox. Other books have been written in the series. I believe the Seattle Seahawks also have one as well.
Yeah, Ken Daniels did one for the Detroit Red Wings. There are a number of teams. I saw one with the Milwaukee Brewers. There are a lot of teams as part of that great series, and we were one of them.
Absolutely, which is great. And you were the author. You also had Ross McKeon as well. For those that do not know, he's covered San Jose and San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, Yahoo Sports. He was a contributor to NBC Sports California as well, the Hockey News, and it was written in 2018. So talk about that, Dan, and your experience on becoming an official author, if you will.
I'm really proud of that too, and it's funny. I part of what we do on the air is we are writers, we are editors, we are actors, we are all of those things kind of into one. But I've always enjoyed the creative process of writing as well as broadcasting, and the opportunity happened. The series was going to come to San Jose, so Ross McEwen had done a few different types of work for Triumph Books, and they asked him if he thought that he would want to work with me, and Ross said absolutely, and we talked, and we used to speak a couple of nights a week. He'd always call at 9 o'clock at night, and we would go through all of the stories that we wanted to tell in the book. And we split up exactly how we were going to handle those responsibilities, and then we went through the editing process together. It's laborious, but we spent basically a summer basically doing that. And one of the great things about that experience was reliving some of those moments again, but also remembering things, as it were, that we had forgotten about just through our conversations, because Ross has been covering the team since day one as well. And, making a few phone calls to people saying, hey, what happened this particular time, and so forth. I say that there are only a few editing errors in it, but it's not absolutely perfect to the way I'd like, but it's pretty close. And I have to say that I always tell people that the story I'm most proud of in that book, we tell a whole passel of them, The Joe Thornton story I was sharing earlier is told in slightly more detail. There were so many different things that happened over the years. The very first long road trip in the history of the Sharks, we had a flight delay that lasted, I think, 13 hours. It was a flight across the country, so we were sitting in Oakland, and about 5 different crazy things happened just sitting there waiting for the plane to take off. And then we didn't actually get to our hotel room in Hartford until 6 a.m. day of the game. Team lost all the games on the road trip, by the way. Oh. And it was a 6-game trip. But anyway, those are some of the stories we told away from, the wins and the losses that unless you were there, you wouldn't know what happened. And, we told the story. I actually think it might have been in Ross's book. I gave him that one, but where Ron Wilson got a congratulatory stick for his 1000th game behind the bench from Teemu Selanne. It said, dear Ron, I always, you're my favorite coach, whatever. And he sent it to him. Well, the Sharks were playing Colorado just a few days later. That was when Teemu was there. And Ron looked at the stick and he said, I think this stick is illegal. He measured it. It was illegal. So then we got down to the final minute of the game. There was a penalty on the Sharks in the last minute of play in the third. Game was tied. So Colorado was going to have the power play going into overtime. Overtime comes out and starts. Ron measures Teemu's stick. Guess what? It's illegal. So we killed off the penalty and ended up, as I remember, winning the game. So after the game, Teemu said he's not my favorite coach anymore. But that's a fun story we tell. So a lot of little stories like that we talk about. But as I said, my favorite chapter in that book is the last one, because it's something that nobody else would be able to share with the fan base, and that is that I was able to unite a businessman in the Bay Area with his birth father, who happened to be a National Hockey League player who was one of the most notorious players in the history of the NHL. He's one of 2 players that was suspended for life for gambling on games. And we found out all of this stuff, and we were able to reunite him with not only his birth father, who obviously didn't know him, and he also got to meet on both sides of his birth family, his birth father and birth mother. He got to meet half brothers and half sisters, and he's continued that relationship to the present day. And it's a very complicated story. But the other thing he found out in that process was how lucky he was that he had been adopted, just because of the trials and tribulations of those families that they had. So I think it was a full circle story, but a real human interest story. And the fact that it's involving this notorious part of NHL history that's never talked about, I think is really something fascinating. So that makes I think the book worth picking up just to read that chapter, and I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I actually just ordered it about 3 days ago because I had no idea that the book existed. So I blame Amazon Prime for not being here on time, because I really would have loved to have it here and surprised you. But I can't wait to read that, because that's something else that is on the to-do list. But I want to get into the final 5 of the third period, if you will, here of our conversation. And now I want to ask you this, Dan. I want to go back a little bit. And for those that have been watching or watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, we'd go back from 98 all the way to 84. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to go back just a tiny bit. And now with COVID going on and unrest in America right now, we look back to the game against, I think it was March 11th, was the Sharks' last game in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. And it was
over 20,000 fans were there that night.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it was a lopsided win for Chicago, 6-2. But tell us what the thought process was when you started hearing things about COVID, and then the moment that you heard that the season was suspended. What went through your mind?
Well, here's the process, right? So we were in Denver, Colorado during the course of that road trip, and we started seeing the signs of social distancing and everything else. And that was sort of the first signs that those things were going to happen. Actually, it was a home game against Colorado, but we were on the road and got to Chicago. Went through the game day. Again, there was a little bit more about that topic. 20,000 plus people came to the game, but there were all kinds of discussions as to whether or not this was going to be it, whether or not they were really going to shut down the season for a brief time. We did not know whether they were going to pause it or what. And we had a game in Chicago, but then I remember how we were talking earlier about our travel schedule. Mm-hmm. We flew right after the game to St. Louis. So got on the plane, flew to St. Louis, got there very late, slept in, got up the next morning, and then we were getting all of the messages saying there was going to be no game in St. Louis the next day, and the team was going to fly straight home. So it was a bit surreal. It usually is in instances like this. I remember that the day of the Columbine High School massacre, the Sharks were practicing in Denver, and everybody's, all the cameramen that were there to cover the playoff series, all of their beepers started going off, and they had to leave and go deal with that terrible atrocity, and how emotional that was, and how we had to reschedule the series. So we've been through a number of things like that, but this was a little bit shame. I've been through a game in which they had an earthquake during the game. That was at SAP Center in a playoff game, ironically against Colorado again. But here we are in St. Louis getting up, and we found out that this was going to happen. And flying home was a little bit strange because it almost, a feeling of an incomplete season. And that's the way it's going to be for the Sharks, because their season here is over after 70 games. So while, a number of other guys get to play in the NHL, whenever that actually begins, ostensibly in July, and we look forward to that. For us, it's kind of a bittersweet feeling that the season at least couldn't have been completed, in a normal fashion. Yet, having said that, health is the most important thing, and that's the first thing we think about. And so I think it's been handled reasonably prudently, and we hope that things get back to normal very, very soon. But the feeling, to your question again, it was a bit surreal, a little bit incomplete, and a little bit odd.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to think about that, and I know from my part here, and working with college basketball, and working in the NCAA, and hearing that, well, everything is just canceled. Literally everything is canceled. And I say to myself, wow, that's really weird when you're on the go all the time, just like how you are. And then it's just, it just comes crashing down when there's nothing and there's zero. That adjustment for you, that's actually a perfect question now, Dan, is that, for you being, doing so much and traveling a lot and doing that. Now, as you were talking about, you were talking about Columbine, you were talking about the earthquake and the aforementioned events that went on. What is the adjustment like going from a lot to nothing?
Well, it's like ending your season in the second round, and the playoffs are going to go on, but your season has come to a sudden end. It's we've been very fortunate in San Jose to not have very many seasons in which there haven't been Stanley Cup playoffs, but I suppose the feeling of emptiness that you get is similar to that when your club that you expect a lot out of doesn't quite get there. And you're on the outside looking in, so to speak, when it comes to the Stanley Cup dance, because there's nothing like Stanley Cup playoff hockey. So right. I think that it's probably comparable to that, or the years that we've had work stoppages, whether the season that was missed in 04-05, that was a very strange time. Two other opportunities where there was a work stoppage, and we had 48 game seasons. So that's the thing about the NHL, is we've seen just about everything in Gary Bettman's tenure as the commissioner of the league. So obviously, it probably speaks to the idea that they were very organized and very well reasoned, and didn't do any of the discussions about it in public. They just made sure that everything was taken care of and buttoned down before they came out with this well organized plan to get the league back. And I think it's a tribute to them that because of all these different experiences we've had together, they've been able to adjust on the fly, and will continue to do so, as you see in the way that the plan is going to be rolled out, that it allows for possible changes, that you have to give credit to the NHL and the way they've handled things. And things have seemed to go more swimmingly and smoothly than perhaps some of the other major sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the last couple of questions, Dan. A few actually. There's one fan on YouTube. Steve Cropper is his name, and said he bring we go back to after your accident, and you had brought up how you have a few rods, on your lower body, and he asks this. He says, does Dan set off metal detectors at the airports?
That's a good question. I'd expect that from Steve. I know Steve quite well. He's a huge Sharks fan and somebody that's been around a long time. Hi, Steve. I would say that in general that doesn't happen. They are made out of titanium, so that's good. But I do have a card that I carry just in case anybody has any questions. But we haven't had any trouble with that. No.
Good, thank God. Yeah, that would be that wouldn't be good, and I'm sure all the Sharks players and staff would be looking at you like, oh, why are we causing a delay here? That's not good.
I bet some of them have got metal in them too, so you never know.
Yeah, that's true. So thank you, Steve, very much for asking the question. Now into the final couple of minutes here, Dan. First off, I really do appreciate you taking the time. We're actually rolling up on 2 hours here. I really do appreciate you taking time on a Monday evening closing in on 6 o'clock in the Bay Area and closing in on 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. Now we have to ask you this because everyone has been asked this, Dan. All 20 guests, including yourself, have been or will be asked this right now. Because summer is on the way, or in your case, it's been there for a while. Here or I guess unofficially here. We've asked everybody about what their favorite ice cream flavor is. And I will give I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you know your broadcast partner, Brett Hedigan, and what his favorite ice cream might be?
Boy, I don't know what Brett would pick. I would suspect that it's probably something very sophisticated.
Well, all right. That's pretty good. I'll give you what he said. It was Americone from Ben & Jerry's.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and it's and for those that do not know what Americone from Ben & Jerry's is, it's vanilla ice cream with fudge-covered waffle cone pieces and a caramel swirl. So sophisticated.
As I said, very sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly. So now to add your name to a list that features some baseball players, news people, NFL wide receivers. We've gotten cookie dough. We've gotten mint chocolate chip. We've gotten coffee, cookie dough, but our leader is vanilla, plain vanilla. So Dan, episode number 20 on the list. You are the first one. What is your favorite ice cream?
Hate to say it, I'm pretty boring. I'm a basic flavor guy. I like vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, but if I had to pick one, it'd probably be vanilla. But most specifically, however, there's a great gelato place in Florence, Italy that I was very fortunate to go to. And it's called A Badiani. They make the greatest gelato anywhere. And I crave it. And it's been a long time since I've been over there. But, having grown up in the New York metropolitan area, the tri-state area, as it will, I can remember hearing Tom Carvel do all those ice cream commercials. And I still am a sucker for a Carvel ice cream every once in a while. But out here, there's a place called Marianne's, which is in Santa Cruz. They make fabulous ice cream, and there are a variety of other gelato people. But that's one of my favorite things in the world, honestly. If I had to pick to use the phrase, a more sophisticated flavor that wasn't vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, I'd probably pick black raspberry.
Black raspberry.
Black raspberry. That's a very tasty flavor of ice cream.
Okay.
And I remember the old butter crunch from the Howard Johnson's days back when I was growing up. I guess I'm dating myself, but
wow.
But that was another good one too. I haven't had that in a long, long time.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'd say that those are probably my choices.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So, now vanilla takes the lead. So, but we also have / black raspberry. That's pretty good. So, Dan, you are the first one to ever say black raspberry in 20 episodes here on the Zoom interview series. That's fantastic. So back to the final, the last couple of questions here for you. Now, let's say, during these uncertain times, these trying times, Dan, we have, people with that have been told to either shelter in place, out here in New York, pause. And we've been told where we'd have to stay home. Go outside a little bit here and there, do your thing, but do not socialize and social distance. Now, to aspiring athletes, aspiring broadcasters, etc., and you're having some sort of a difficulty mentally, and even for an athlete physically, what would be the advice that you would give to anyone, as I said, potential broadcaster or aspiring broadcaster, to keep their focus and what they can do to continue honing their craft in these trying times?
Well, there's no doubt that that it is a trying time for a lot of people, but I think it presents, especially with the technology that we have, there's a golden opportunity for people to be creative. I think one of the interesting stories is that you make good with what you have, and you can find amazing things to do with the materials that you have. And I think that that's an interesting challenge. Whether it's I happen to be a very, very big fan of one of the very first video comedians in the history of electronic media. That's Ernie Kovacs, who I think was a real genius in terms of how he was able to utilize television and make a very creative statement that was comedy without vaudeville, without theater, but actually was suited to the medium that you have. And if there is an aspiring broadcaster, you probably have your own YouTube channel. You have an opportunity to, you might have a gimbal that you put your cell phone on so that you can videotape yourself if you're in the video business. If you're in the audio business, you can learn a lot more about music, and you can learn about mixing audio and how something might work. But it's a golden opportunity for you to experiment and to try something different. One thing that I'm doing right now is I'm able to put together all of these historic broadcasts, and we're streaming them pretty much 24/7 now. But I've been going back and finding all of these broadcasts and putting together little features on them and so forth. And I think that that's been very fruitful. So do that, but also get away from this a little bit too. Read a book, talk to the people that you love. That's probably the most important thing that you can do, is to provide that support, but also to use the time when things aren't going so quickly, to take advantage of that by having good conversations with people you care about, and share your feelings about how things are going, and maybe if you feel so inclined to also impart your misgivings about it, and make sure that you get that out, because if you do that, I think we'll be able to get through this a lot more quickly, but we'll also be able to do it in a creative way. So it's a combination of those things. Use the elements that you have. Walk out and take a walk wherever you can. I don't think that there's any place where you can't do that. And make sure also that you show your concern for your fellow man, because there's a lot of people here that all of these restaurants, certainly in New York, are having problems, and they're takeout only or whatever. Use the resources that you have perhaps to help support those businesses a little bit, because they'll remember that when things get back to normal. And I think that the kindness that we have in that regard, the willingness to show a helping hand, are all things that we can definitely do. And I think that that's something that I'm trying to do, and I think that all of my colleagues are trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new normal that will be implemented once things begin to open up again. So slowly but surely, we'll see. It's already we're already 6 months into the new year, and
It's hard to believe it, isn't it?
It's crazy. And the wild part, Dan, is that I just heard Governor Andrew Cuomo say today we're at day, I think, 101 of this, and just to think that just 100 days ago you were in Chicago or you were in St. Louis, and you get that call, and then you're back home sheltering in place, and then 100 days go by, and now you're here talking to me. I feel bad for you, but then seriously, thank you though. No, really, really, really good stuff. And I'm going to ask you, this is going to be the last question for sure. During your time now sheltering in place, you and your wife, has there been any house projects, obviously extended family time now? Did you watch The Last Dance? That was the biggest sports thing that was on, just a few weeks ago. Any different movie series or in books, any other books that you've read possibly?
We're fans of classic movies, so we've been doing quite a bit of that. I have not yet watched The Last Dance in total. I've seen part of it, but I do want to watch it. It's a fascinating series. It's going to really be well regarded for time immemorial. So that's really great. But yeah, this morning we had the phone company show up to do a little upgrade on my internet at home to make things a little bit better, because we're both working from home, and a lot of little projects like that. So we've had a chance to have some great meals and to cook together, and to do that in a way. You can probably check me out on Facebook. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that we've done there, and also just to spend time with our families. Both of our families live a couple thousand miles from here. In my case, I have a lot of people still in Connecticut and on the East Coast. So that's something that we do as well. But you can't forget about the game of hockey. You can't forget about what we do for a living. And obviously, you're preparing for that time when that's going to start up again. And for us, that's going to be for a little while. But obviously, that's something that we're really looking forward to doing. But it's mostly keeping a positive attitude, picking up a couple of interesting books. I've got some. I'm reading a story about a Revolutionary War battle on the Dan in Virginia. I enjoy reading some economics and political texts that keep me on track with the news and with ideas about how to make our country run a little bit better. So that's always a nice little thing to do as a hobby. I like history quite a bit, and so between that and watching a lot of movies from the 1940s and 50s, I think we're very, very happy, and at least getting through this time until it gets back to more normal.
Yeah, absolutely. That really is fantastic. But one little quick joke that I have to add in here is that, okay, so now you just said that you had your internet upgraded, and I need whoever you have, because they told me out here that they can't come until November. So I need who you have, Dan. That's fantastic that they were able to be inside.
California's ahead of the curve. What can I tell you?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Oh man, that's fantastic. But ladies and gentlemen, the radio voice of the San Jose Sharks, Dan Rusanowsky, KFOX 98.5 in the Bay Area. Dan, I really appreciate you joining me here on this Monday evening. And again, an hour and 58 minutes in, I really do appreciate it. And all of our fans, and I know for a fact all the Sharks fans that are watching in your area really do appreciate it as well.
That means a lot to me, Joey. Thanks a lot. And to everybody, I just say thanks for supporting this great sport of hockey, for loving broadcasting play-by-play. And remember that the creative process is something really special. If you're part of that, that's something great, but always consider it a privilege to be around the great people that are in our wonderful country and people that we work with. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, for sure. And just before you do go, just to read our closing credits. So episode number 6 of the Essential Wrestling Podcast will come your way Wednesday night, June 10th. Starting at 6 p.m. right here on the Eastern Observer. Tyler Adele and Al Carl will bring you everything up to date with wrestling. And then also, Dan, actually, your counterpart for the New York Islanders, Chris King, will be joining me here on Saturday night. The New York Islanders radio voice here on WRHU, Hofstra University Radio 88.7, will be joining me here on episode number 21 of the Zoom interview series on Saturday night, June 13th, starting at 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, that's Dan Rusanowsky. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for joining us. We'll see you next time. Hold on 1 second. All right. Really appreciate